I'm asking for a no vote on this bill. And Madam Speaker, there are many reasons, but I want to talk about three of them. Legal financial obligations, LFOs. These are the prices that we ask convicted criminals, felons, to pay for the misdeeds they've done against individual victims, but also, Madam Speaker, against all of us, against society as a whole. And it is true. We used to have other elements to LFOs that convicted criminals had to pay, and we've winnowed that down. We are at the last couple of obligations in the LFOs, and that's what this bill considers. One is a fee that goes to offset a DNA database, the entry of the criminal's DNA information into that database. And the other goes to the Victims' Compensation Fund. And that's important, Madam Speaker. It's important that an individual who has wronged another individual, but has also wronged the state as a whole, should pay an obligation, should have to undertake as part of a social contract a cost for their transgression. You know, Madam Speaker, the great social scientist and really philosopher Jeremy Bentham was one of the first people to look at correction systems, at prison systems and penitentiaries, and try to make a science of why we as a civil society have prisons, why we attach legal obligations to criminals. And Bentham's point in studying different systems of justice was that the imprisonment and the legal obligations were actually a hopeful sign. They were a mechanism by which the criminal, the transgressor, could reestablish a meaningful connection to the society that he or she wronged. And if we take away that mechanism for reconnecting, we are doing just as much harm as the fiscal impact does to the individual's ability to reconnect with civil society. So these are deep things, Madam Speaker, but I think they're important. We want rehabilitation. We hope for rehabilitation. But if we take away that sense of transgression and then re-establishment of connection to a civil society, we're doing just as much harm as any other bad form of incarceration. So let's not strip our system of rehabilitation of one of its essential elements. That's one reason of three, Madam Speaker. The other reason you've heard about already, I won't go into as much detail in, but there is the matter of the victims of these crimes. There is the matter that we send a social and cultural signal to all Washingtonians when we lighten the load of the perpetrator without doing an equal bit of justice to the victim. That's the second item. The third, Madam Speaker, is one we've spoken about a little bit, but I don't think enough. Mechanically, fiscally, financially, this policy is a tax shift. It shifts the costs of many of the good things that we want to do for victims in this state from the perpetrators, albeit they may not cover the entire cost of the services we want to provide, but their portion of that, which our fiscal note indicates is some $5 million a year. It shifts that $5 million a year from the people who caused the problem, who caused the trouble, who made the victims, to the general public, to the general population of the state of Washington. That is a tax shift, Madam Speaker, just as much as other fiscal policies we consider here shift taxes. And that is wrong, both fiscally, but it's also wrong, going back to Bentham, philosophically. We should not shift this kind of cost most of all. This is not like shifting a bit of sales tax. It's not shifting a bit of property tax, as other tax shifts do. It's shifting something much more foundational and substantive. It's shifting the cost rightly borne by the authors of the cost to those who had no party to the underlying harm. Madam Speaker, we hear about littered highways, we hear about broken windows, but the broken windows and the littered highways, they come from something. They come from a cultural message, a societal message. And what legal financial obligations do, what paying the price of this DNA database entry and of the Victims' Compensation Fund, what that does is that sends a cultural message, a societal message, that if you break the law, there is a cost. And does that, bearing that cost, does that make hardship? Well, of course it makes hardship. Because the transgression, both against the individual victim and the state, creates a cost that inflicts a hardship on innocent parties. So it's important, Madam Speaker, beyond just the fiscal impact, and the fiscal impact is considerable, it's important, Madam Speaker, that we say no to this policy, no matter how well-meaning the policy may be, because of that cultural and societal message. We've gotten to the point where we need to clarify the messages we send, not just to our young people, but to all the people of the state, that we are a civil society, that when you violate the tenets of civil society, there is a price to pay. Does that make your life a little harder? Yes, okay. Does it make it a lot harder? Maybe it does. But we have to reestablish, Madam Speaker, that there is a cost. There's a cost in all things. And as we've talked about on this floor and other matters, costs are fiscal in nature, but they're also economic in the general sense of economic. That we want to fix the value of things. We want to fix the societal cost as well as the financial cost. And the importance of legal financial obligations is that they are a pricing signal. They tell the people of the state what transgressing against our laws mean. If we wipe them all out, if we make them all zero, there's no sense of the cost of a transgression. You know, it's not that we want to keep people down, Madam Speaker. It's that we want to lift all people up. And you can't lift all people up unless you acknowledge what law means, what obligations mean. And again, Madam Speaker, this allows the transgressor an avenue back to civil society. But the transgressor has to recognize the obligation in order to bridge that gap, the gap that the transgressor chose to make in the first place. It is humane, Madam Speaker, it is civil that we vote no on this bill and maintain a sense of civil order.